Okay, it looks like we've got slides. So hi, thanks everyone for being here. My name is Brad Newberg. I'm with Google. Today I'm going to be talking about a variety of things. I want to talk about how we use SVG at Google, why we're excited about it, and some of the work that we've been doing with Internet Explorer to enable SVG. So starting, I just want to say this is a really exciting time. In some ways, I'm relatively new to the SVG community, and it feels like there's a real renaissance happening. I'll touch more on that, but this year and next year, we're seeing everything from all of the browsers, Firefox, Safari, Chrome, Opera, all having SVG implementations. We're seeing real authoring tools like Inkscape. Adobe Illustrator has good import and export. We're seeing real adoption and interest, and this is kind of riding a general wave. The last year and a half, we're really seeing HTML5 take off, CSS3, web fonts. So it's a really exciting time. And before I kind of get into the bulk of some of the stuff I want to talk about, I want to really acknowledge, I think SVG has a really special history. I've been in a lot of computer communities, and this one, I'm just really blown away by the kind of level of passion and the level of commitment. And I want to briefly kind of call out to some of the folks who I think really worked in the 2005-2006 time period. I'll kind of talk about some of the work our group is doing and how we arrived at SVG, but I look back at the folks working in 2005-2006, and I think these are the folks that were really doing this out of a labor of love, really helped move things forward to that next step, which is why we're here at the sort of beginning of this renaissance. So I want to kind of briefly call out some of their names. I know I'm going to miss some people. Like I said, this is a great community. There's lots of folks doing lots of cool stuff. So I briefly want to call out some of the folks. Well, I already did too many, but John Cruz, obviously, him and the team with Inkscape. If you haven't checked out Inkscape, it's a pretty amazing piece of open source software. Of course, everyone involved with the Firefox SVG implementation, I think they really came out with really strong work, one of the first folks to really bring these into browsers. Everyone involved in WebKit and Opera, bringing those implementations to light. And then no community is complete without the evangelists, the people writing books, the people writing articles. I've gotten to hear some of the stories about organizing this conference year after year. It's a volunteer-created conference. I've watched them in action. It's pretty amazing all over the world putting this together. So I'm just sort of want to call out some of the names of folks who I've really seen really being evangelists and you know, working the nights, working the weekends because they believe in this technology. So I just want to kind of give them a shout out. And of course, and more, I know I missed people. So if I did, please give yourself a pat on the back. So I want to share a personal story. In 2004, early 2005, I was a dynamic HTML hacker. I was a JavaScript guy. And this was before the fancy name Ajax. It was not an easy time to be a JavaScript person or a DHTML person. I know we've got Alex over here. I think he can call it the great dark ages of DHTML, as some of us call it. And the reason I bring it up, I think there's a lot of parallels with SVG. I remember 2004 going to the bookstore looking for books on DHTML, and they were all out of print. I remember I was at a startup company at the time, and we had a web-based aggregator for feeds. And I remember saying, hey, why don't we use DHTML and this XML HTTP request thing? We didn't have a shorter name for that yet. You had to say the full thing. Let's make something more interactive. And people laughed at me. They said, hey, DHTML, that's dead. That's buggy. That's not in enough places. And then, of course, we all know history. 2005 rolls around. Sites like Flickr, Google Maps, helps legitimize DHTML, gives it a nice new name, Ajax, and the rest is history. Suddenly everyone woke up and said, hey, wow, this stuff's all over the place. We can get real work done. And the interesting thing about DHTML and Ajax is that it really was invented by Microsoft in 1997 with Outlook Web Access. And it took about 8 years for folks to kind of wake up and realize, hey, I can use this stuff. I can do real work. I can get interesting things done. And so a renaissance really happens with DHTML. And the same thing is happening with SVG. I like to kind of paraphrase Gandhi. I know it's a little overused, but I think it's overused because there's truth to it. Kind of paraphrasing Gandhi, the famous thing, first they ignore you, then they hype the heck out of you, then they leave you for dead, and then suddenly you're getting real work done. Okay, DHTML went through the same thing. If for some reason web technologies have to go through this worse than everything else. JavaScript went through the same thing. JavaScript was a shunned language. CSS went through the same thing. If you were in 2001 talking about CSS, you know, you had to wear some asbestos suits. So I want to, you know, now that I've kind of shared that really I think the parallels are very strong with DHTML. I want to just briefly talk about why is Google excited? Why are we so excited about SVG? Well, I don't think it's been a secret that we're excited about the web. We're excited about HTML5. And generally, when we use the term HTML5, it's kind of turning into the term Ajax, for better or worse, that like a larger term. It's not just the spec. And it's becoming a bit of a placeholder for all this great web technology that can really advance things forward. The formal HTML5 spec, things like geolocation, web fonts, SVG, CSS3, faster JavaScript. We're really bullish on HTML5 and this whole family of technologies because we see it solving real problems. One of the most exciting formal aspects of HTML5, the spec, is that it now allows you to drop SVG right into a normal HTML page. SVG just becomes more tags that you can add to HTML, but now everything doesn't have to be a box. Everything doesn't have to be a div or a table. Now you have circles and rectangles. It's kind of a straightforward idea. We should have had it a long time ago, but now that we are going to have it, and that's really exciting. You know, I think we're a search company. I know sometimes we do things that we're not, you know, we're doing things outside of search, but we like things that are human readable, that are text friendly, because they're searchable, and SVG is very searchable. Especially, you know, someone once asked me, okay, why would I want to search a vector image? If it's an illustration of a tiger, you don't want to search that. If it's a medical diagram, if it's electoral results for the last election we just went through, these are interesting things we want in search results. And what makes SVG so cool is it's not just images, but hyperlinks can be inside and point inside of them. That's stuff that can be used for PageRank, for signals. That's interesting. There's a market demand for SVG and vector graphics on the web. I want to share the story a little bit later for why the group I'm on chose vector graphics and SVG in particular as our first one. But folks want to be able to do drawing on the web. They want SVG and Canvas. I'll talk about both of those in a bit. There's a clear market demand, and so developers want this. Another reason Google is so excited and bullish about SVG is it integrates. It works with the rest of the web stack. It integrates with CSS and HTML and JavaScript. You don't have to learn a whole new set of technologies. You use the skills you already know. So that's really exciting, that level of integration. I think that we're going to start seeing more and more interesting things because it's not just trapped within a little box. It's really a part of the browser. One of the other reasons is SVG is a view source technology. So view source technologies doesn't mean that you have the right to, you know, look at everyone's source code, but it does mean that it makes it much easier to learn from what other people are doing. I have found this so much the last year and a half. I'll see a cool demo from Doug or from Rick Masters or a lot of the folks here in this community, and I'll say, how the heck do they do that? I just go to view source. I learn from what they're doing. That's really powerful. And that really undergirds the web itself. And then if it's open source, it's easy. You cut and paste. You like that gradient? Grab the definition. If it's an open source font and the definition's right in the file, cut and paste that. That's really cool. And finally, we're excited about SVG because it's easy to import and export. That means you don't get trapped into any specific tool. And it's also very server friendly. You can throw up a PHP script, a Google App Engine site that emits SVG as easily as you do HTML. It's much harder to emit binary objects, but you can use any standard templating language to spit out a little bit of SVG, especially with HTML5 because you can mix it in line. So now that you know a little bit about why we're excited about SVG, let's look at where we're putting our sort of our commitment to it. How are we actually using SVG? I'm going to just show you a few of the places. One of them is, I don't know who here is, so in Google Docs, you can actually drop illustrations in, and you have kind of a lightweight diagramming and drawing tool, which is great if you're trying to explain something. And has anyone gotten a chance to play with this? Awesome. This uses SVG. It uses SVG on every web browser. It has to use VML on IE, but we use SVG on all the other browsers. Here's an example drawing. My drawing skills are pretty lousy, so I had to find someone else to give me a good drawing. My original one was like a happy face, and someone was like, that does not look very good. So last night I'm like, who has a picture? Another place we use this is something called the Google Visualization API. This is a really cool API that you can give it data from many different kinds of data sources, JSON, XML, on the URL, a Google spreadsheet, and it will give you different kinds of visualizations. Well, this is a perfect use case for SVG. And some of the visualizations do use SVG. Let me show you some of these. This right here is actually, it's called a gauge. It's a visualization that will turn anything into a gauge. You give it a variety of values. And you're actually looking at a Google spreadsheet that has what is known as a gadget. And that gadget has the visualization in it. It's turtles all the way down. And these gauges are actually SVG. So as we change the size, it still stays beautiful. That's the scalable aspect. And it's actually, the gauges are keeping track of memory and CPUs. So that's one of them. Here's another nice one, a simple pie chart. Click in, get the breakdown. The cool thing about the Google Visualization API, it's very easy to use. You can even just give it a URL and it will return back the results of what you're looking at. So it's very straightforward to use. One of the final places we use SVG is we have, like most companies, we've got an extensive set of JavaScript libraries, and one of them has a cross-browser drawing abstraction that uses SVG on every browser. Again, it does use VML on IE, and that gives you a standard way to do drawing, and a lot of our products use that as a consistent API. So these are some of the places that we use SVG internally. I want to share a little bit about the group that I'm on and sort of get into some of the work we've been doing. I'm on a group called Open Web Advocacy. Our motto is help web technologies get better faster. And depending if we're in a good mood or not, sometimes it's help web technologies get better faster. Sometimes it's help web technologies suck less, better, faster, depending on if we're happy or not. But our job is to really get out there and educate, evangelize. A lot of us have a JavaScript background. So we create JavaScript toolkits that help bring along other browsers so we can have more parity, because it's hard for developers to use a new technology if it's not everywhere. So helping the chicken and egg problem. So we wear a lot of different hats. And our group started about a year ago. And when we kicked off, we were like, what should we focus on first? Each of us sort of attacked different problem sets. And on my side, I said, what do developers want? So I went to something called the Open Ajax Alliance's browser wish list. It was a very cool survey that was done a while back. Actually, another one's coming up. And this asked a tremendous number of developers, what do you want? If you could grab the browser makers by the lapels and say, here's what I want, what would that be? And what do you think the #1 request by far of everything else above cross-domain requests, other various kinds of things? What do you think the #1 request was? I don't know. Doug, what do you think it was? VML. The VML. So the #1 request was, we want web vector graphics. Specifically, we want SVG in the canvas tag on every browser. That was the #1 request. So that made our job easy. We said, here's the #1 request. Let's take a look at that. My background, again, is in JavaScript, like I said. I generally end up getting browsers to do things they weren't really designed to do. And so I said, we already have some JavaScript help for the canvas tag on IE that Eric Arvidsson, Emil Eklund, other folks at Google had worked on. I said, what can we do with SVG? How can we help SVG? So sort of, if I had only known what it would take, sort of delved down into that in terms of how can we help bring along IE on this front. Because I want to get into, we've seen amazing progress. So one of the things I want to share too, a year ago too, I said, where is SVG? I've always been a fan of it. I said, where does it come from? And last year I was blown away when I looked back at the state of the community. I was like, wow, there's implementations everywhere. We've got authoring tools. We've got this excited community and real stuff happening. Wikipedia, which we'll talk about, and Breon's also here for the conference, is doing amazing work with SVG, the 6th largest site on the web. I was blown away at how much had happened. So I said, what can help us get to that next step? What's the next sort of progression to help things go forward? And before getting into that, I do want to say I don't want to beat up Microsoft or IE. I really respect that they came to the conference this year. I really respect that they're here having a dialogue, sending real people. I think we should give them a round of applause. I think that's really cool. I don't know if that's not embarrassing. I'm embarrassing them. I'm embarrassing them. I know for many JavaScript hackers, we learned DHTML and IE. I know I did. So I think it's really cool to have you here at the event this year. At the same time, one of the things that is blocking SVG from going to that next step is we've got these awesome implementations, but we don't have them on IE yet. And that is hurting developers who are bursting at the seams to deploy stuff with this. So finding some kind of realistic way to help address that issue was one of the things our team wanted to look at. And one of the other points is a little subtle. The fact that SVG doesn't work in the 99.9% of the HTML that's out there. This is not an appropriate time to get into XHTML versus HTML. But I like to say when you go in and you're getting a PhD thesis, your research advisor says choose one research topic. If you show up and you've got 2 or 3 novel things, I'll say go back to the drawing board. Chaining SVG to XHTML is 2 research topics at the minimum. It's saying they both have to succeed or they both unfortunately fail. We were saying can we uncouple these, allow SVG to be used in normal HTML, and let them sort of fight for their own merits in that sense. So that was one of the other primary things that developers sometimes want to just drop a few tags. They want a square with rounded rectangles to make a button that doesn't need some crazy way to get rounded rectangles that you can just use a little SVG. So that we saw that as the second blocker. So our solution for both was a JavaScript library. Before I kind of take you into that and show you some demos, I want to say that we're not the only ones doing this. There are a lot of really amazing toolkits in the community. They're all speaking at this conference. I'm going to run through them really quick. All of them are taking different approaches to give you a consistent way to draw SVG on all browsers, including Internet Explorer. And it's a real testament to the fact that there's real demand for this, and people actually, I call it, vote with your sweat. It's kind of a crazy term, but if you believe in something, ship code, and people are. So people think this is important. Obviously, the Raphael library doing really amazing work. They are speaking today, this morning in this room. Make sure to catch that. Dojo X, doing some very cool work. They have different pluggable backends, so you can have different kinds of renderers, and it integrates with the rest of the Dojo infrastructure. So you get data abstraction. You can do some really cool stuff. Again, 12 o'clock today in this room. And then the Ample SDK, Sergey Alinsky is doing some very interesting work in terms of a consistent development environment. Again, that's also being talked about in this room today. So I encourage you to check out the work they're doing. So let's jump into what we're involved in. So the name of the library is the SVG Web library. And what makes this unique is there's nothing extra to download. You can either say use or abuse. We use facilities that are already present on about 97% of the web browsers out there. So there's nothing for the user to download. And we give the illusion of native SVG support for both static and dynamic SVG images. And it's as easy as dropping a JavaScript file into your page so that users don't have to download new software. It just works. So before this toolkit, you have roughly about 30% coverage for SVG. That's essentially adding up the other browsers. Once you've got the toolkit, you essentially have close to 100% of the installed web base, probably closer to 95%, but we'll round up 5%. Truth in advertising. That's cool because that means that as a developer, you don't face the chicken and egg problem. You can just start using the technology you're interested in and get stuff done. Now, I want to mention I've done a fair bit of open source, and this has been a really exciting project. We've got more people outside of Google working on this than inside. We've got Rick Masters, who's actually here, one of the lead developers. He'll be actually coming up a little bit later in the presentation to show some cool demos. We've got James Height, who does not, he's not a giant Z. I couldn't get a picture from him in time. And we've just got a whole host of folks in the community just actively putting this through its paces. I want to mention that we've made a lot of progress with SVG Web. It is an alpha. This is an early access. As we continue working with folks as they put it through its paces, I know Sam's using it on his blog. Shelly Powers is using it for some cool stuff. We'll talk about some of the work we're doing with Wikipedia around using this. We're going to be like open source. We'll announce beta when it's, you know, actually 3.0. That's the open source way. So let me show you some demos. So this is Firefox, and this is native SVG. These images are from Flickr. We're seeing we can do stuff with the mouse with them. You could imagine building a larger app with photo pickers and so on. One moment though. I should mention that the library works on IE 6, 7, and 8. So we've got complete coverage. This is IE 8. If we jump over to IE, we see the exact same demo running with the same fidelity in IE. And this is not just SVG. There's JavaScript that lives in this. The JavaScript thinks that there's real native support in the browser. Let's see another sample. I really like this one. Shelly Powers put this together a few weeks ago. I like it because it's one of those gets real work done kinds of things. So Shelly, she's got a blog, and she wants to put an image in the background. And she wants it to scale based on the size of the browser. Straightforward, right? If you use a bitmap image, it'll get ugly based on how it is. It'll get distorted. She'd love to use SVG in the background. Well, now she can. This in the background is from the Open Clip Art library. As we change the size of the browser, we get that nice scaling quality of SVG. Of course, that's SVG Web in the background doing that. Michael Neutz, at the end of this, I'll put up when he's talking. He's doing some really cool work with mapping, things like that. This is a sample that he helped port. I think someone wrote the original one. What I like about it is it shows a couple of different things. It actually shows demographics. It shows the population of Germany at different times. And SVG is really good at this. It's rich data. You slice and dice. This is directly integrated into the HTML. The SVG is in normal HTML. And we see the HTML updating as we do it. What makes this really cool is some people are like, okay, why don't you just use an image? Well, on the fly, we can change the language. Here we are changing it to Russian inside of the SVG. Here we are changing it to French. And that's cool. And that depends on the fact that SVG, again, is just text. So it's easy to change the language. It's easy to make these intelligent. And that's a cool thing. I know Brian is excited about these kinds of things. He'll mention some cool things that they're doing. You know, SVG and maps go together like peanut butter and jelly. It's one of those classic uses of SVG. Michael Neutz will talk more about this in his talk. He's been creating an interactive overview of the election results for the German election that I believe happened last week. Happened fairly recently. I see all the folks who I know are from that area nodding. I'm getting that right. We see Germany. We can zoom in and out. We can pan around. We can slice and dice the data. Again, this is another good example of SVGs on the left doing what it does well, HTML on the right, directly embedded in the page. This is in Safari. And I'll mention, I'll talk about this a little bit later and more in the technical talk in the afternoon, but SVG Web also helps the native browsers actually by letting you drop SVG into normal HTML. It doesn't just help IE, it also helps you put it into normal HTML. And it actually patches over a couple of bugs too, so it helps the native stuff too. So these are also using SVG Web. And then here we are in IE. We can still zoom in. We can still slice and dice. And now this developer can deploy his work and know it's going to reach folks. I like this one. I'm a horrible space geek. Don't get me started. I'll talk your ear off. Luther Huffman put this together. It uses the Google Maps API to figure out your latitude and longitude. And then it generates, we're turning off the lights like we're outside. It generates a star map. These are the stars that we would see right above us based on where we are. And that is generated with SVG. Again, real work, getting real stuff done. And this is running on IE. But you almost don't even notice. It just works. The user doesn't really care what the technology is. It just works now. So those are a couple of demos. I spoke a little bit about how JavaScript is tricked. One of the cool things about the toolkit is JavaScript that runs on the page thinks that there's native SVG support. So you get things like getElementById, creating an element. So one of the slight nuances when working with SVG is you have to kind of give the namespace. So you create an element, and we plug this global variable SVG NS into the page because almost everyone defines that anyway. So that can make it easier for people to just start using this. Things like style work. So you can grab your circle from the page. Again, treat it like you do HTML. .style.fill. Just works. We support a huge amount of the DOM. I'm just giving you some small representative samples. You would be bored if I went through, first child, last child, child nodes. So this is a few of the methods. And of course, event listeners, including when you're on IE, when you're dealing with SVG, you can use add event listener. So the end result of this is things just work for the programmer. And I'm not going to go super deep into how this is achieved. I don't know if you know this picture. This is a famous illustration from the Apollo-Soyuz Peace in Space. I think 1976. Peace between the superpowers. Under the covers in SVG Web. I like to say, do you want the blue pill or the red pill? I don't remember which is which. The blue pill is it just works. You feel like you got SVG. You have to do some slight finagling to accommodate SVG Web, but it's pretty minor. The red pill is we use Flash to do the rendering. We do this for purely pragmatic reasons. I like to say I'm a pragmatic person following ideological goals. We do it because it's going to be installed where we need it on the IE instances. And then we use a technology called Microsoft Behaviors, which are very cool. I've long been a fan of them. They've been around for a long time. They essentially allow you to extend the layout engine of IE and do some very nifty stuff. And if you're into such things, pull me aside. We've solved some pretty long-standing issues with Microsoft Behaviors to make them much more robust. So we've kind of got some. If you're into JavaScript hacking, there's some fun solutions we've found. But the end result is that these two things come together, and you get the illusion of native SVG, including like .style, for example, which is like magic getters and setters. And I'll touch a little bit more on this in the tech talk in the afternoon. I want to briefly talk about performance. SVG Web it's not a get out of jail free card for IE. It would be great to have SVG in IE9. The library will always be slower than native support. By definition, it's a JavaScript library, and we've made some amazing progress. We can power some really cool things, but we will always hit an upper ceiling. We're just a JavaScript toolkit. So we can help carry the ball for a little bit, but the native implementations will always be vastly faster, and this is only going to enable users to interact with SVG content, but it will not match the performance of a native implementation. So let me show you some more demos. Oh, you just saw the more demos. I did those in the wrong order. And I also wanted to point out Michael Neutz, who you saw the demographic one and the map example. He's going to be going deeper into the work he's doing. He's been a great member of the community. Tomorrow, in the other room, Maxwell Tech Talk, I want to just briefly touch on how a developer works with this. And if you're interested in this, come to the Tech Talk. I'm going to be essentially taking you through all the steps to get going with SVG Web. But you've got two ways to embed into the page. You can use the object tag, which will also work on IE. We have that working on IE. And you just say, this is SVG, and then you set data equal to, here's what I actually want to show. Or you can directly embed into the page. Now, we do something that's interesting. Let me take you through this page. This is an HTML5 page. That's the HTML5 doc type at the top. HTML5 gives you two ways to embed XML-like data. The first one is you actually can put it into a script tag and set the MIME type. The second one is SVG becomes a native tag, and you just say SVG and you drop it in. We currently support the first one for a variety of reasons in terms of reliability, and that's what you're seeing here. We will eventually like to support the second version, but there's some tricky engineering issues. But the nice thing about this version is you can drop pure unadulterated SVG right into a normal HTML page. And so right here we see that right there. You see a rectangle. I'm sure everyone here knows, seen these kinds of things. Setting where it is, setting its fill. You know what I love? I didn't put it in this one, but if I put RX and RY, that rounds the corners. And I like to say, rounded rectangles. I love in 2009, we're still waiting for rounded rectangles. Well, there you go. You get some rounded rectangles there. Didn't have to break a sweat. So I'd like to invite up Brian Vibber, who's doing some really cool work at Wikipedia. I'm going to show a demo of some of the stuff we've been doing with him after he comes up. But Brian is the CTO of Wikimedia. It's a real pleasure to have him here. It's a real big booster of SVG.
Hi there, everybody. So you've probably heard of Wikipedia before. It's, you know, people do use it on the internet. It's a pretty cool site, as I hope you all think. If you don't, then, well, that's very sad. But anyway, we basically do three main things at Wikipedia and our other sites at Wikimedia Foundation, which is first to build educational and reference materials on the web. Second, to make those freely available under open content licenses. And third, to build them collaboratively on that wacky internet, which is really the most important part where SVG comes into play. We've been using SVG very heavily on Wikipedia and Wikimedia Commons for the last few years because it gives us a standard format for graphics which can be edited by multiple people over time with no, lossiness or having to start over or having to find a, very expensive tool such as Adobe Illustrator. There are free authoring tools that are cross-platform for SVG, and that has enabled people to create all kinds of maps, graphics, icons, diagrams, charts. A huge portion of the graphics that you see on Wikipedia are on the back end built with SVG. But traditionally, most of that action for us has been on the desktop side because the browser support just wasn't quite there. In the last couple of years, we've seen SVG support come pretty well up to snuff on every browser except IE. Still keeping my fingers crossed for IE9. But we've had, kind of a big gap where something like 2/3, 70% of our viewers just would not be able to use native SVG in a browser. which has meant that we haven't been able to do anything dynamic. We basically have static images that sit there in your browser. We actually rasterize them in order to make them most widely available. But there's so many amazing things that SVG promises when you actually put it right in the browser. You can create interactive tools such as the maps that Brad was showing earlier, which would be hugely valuable for a site like Wikipedia, building an interactive tool where you can really explore the data that exists, being able to switch in multiple versions, different data sets, can create a far more compelling educational experience than any static image you can create. Plus, of course, our other goal is that we're building things on the internet interactively, collaboratively with multiple people. And anytime that we require people to download a program to their computer, that is a barrier. Even if it's available for every operating system, it is a barrier to entry, and it makes it harder to use. If we can put it in the browser, bam, suddenly it's a billion times easier. We can do native editing, where you're moving things around right there in your browser. We can enable localization. Support of multiple languages has always been one of our most important things. Wikipedia is available in 200-something languages, a lot. I always forget the number because it's just too big. But being able to create a chart once and then fill in all those localized strings, all those localized names, make that available natively for every language. Wow, I mean, we really, really want to do that. But we've never been able to do it because it's just not going to be available for 70% of our users. With SVG Web, suddenly that gap is actually going to be filled. And until we have real native support in IE, we have something that's almost as good. And that's going to enable us to really make the SVG experience, as it were, insanely better. So I'm really happy about that.
Thanks so much, Brian. It's cool. It's really, really fun to be working with Wikipedia. It's like, oh, I'm working with Wikipedia. It's like I'm a wiki geek, so it's like the mecca of wikis. I want to show you some of the work we've been doing with Wikipedia. One of the things most people don't know is they have this amazing resource called Wikipedia Commons. Every image, video, SVG file ends up on the Commons. It's free culture. They're Creative Commons licensed, and you can work with them. I want to show you a prototype that we've been building with them that allows you to not just sort of see the SVG image on the Commons. Here we are seeing the Wikimedia Commons logo, but you can actually begin to interact with it and take advantage of the scalable nature. So we can pan around, zoom in and out. We get Google Maps style controls. And the cool thing is we come over to IE. And there we go. So you'll be seeing more of this. We're working to QA and move this forward, but expect to see this at some point in the Wikimedia Commons. It's a prototype right now, and it's just a real honor, and it's very exciting to be working with you guys. And Brian himself is speaking this Sunday in this room. If you want to go deeper into the work they're doing, and they're always looking for volunteers, doing all sorts of very cool work around this. Definitely see his talk. And I want to invite one more person up on stage. Rick Masters is one of the leads of SVG Web. He saved my butt on this project. The stuff that he's done is amazing. I remember, we were just going to hit much of SVG 1.1, and there were a lot of things we couldn't hit. I remember I woke up one Monday morning and was like, oh, hey, I did SVG fonts over the weekend, and then I'll show up, oh, hey, I just checked in a partial Smile implementation. So all sorts of cool stuff, and he's actually the senior architect at F5 Networks, and I want to invite him up on stage to show us some quick demos of some other cool SVG Web stuff. Here's IE, and there's the 2. Let me plug in the sound.